And some of it's just silly, like trying to change the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. You know, maybe Poland will become Virginia in a later Trump effort. It is all about Trump trying to magnify his own importance.
Dzień dobry Państwa i moim gościem specjalnym dzisiaj jest pan John Bolton, były ambasador Stanów Zjednoczonych przy ONZ, również były doradca do spraw bezpieczeństwa narodowego podczas pierwszej kadencji Donalda Trumpa w Białym Domu. His Excellency Mr. Bolton, thank you for finding time for this interview.
Glad to be with you. Thank you for having me.
As we know, many things happen if you talk about the U.S. foreign policy in last month. Do you think that the Donald Trump will step more like aggressive, or what we can expect in the next days, next weeks, if we talk about his policy, especially in the relation with Russia, what's happening with the talks between the U.S. and Russia about the Ukraine? What do you predict in the next weeks, next month in this issue?
Well, you know, it's very hard to predict about Trump because he doesn't act like normal presidents do. He doesn't have a philosophy. He doesn't have an overall grand strategy. He doesn't really do policy in the way we conventionally understand that term. His decisions are very transactional, based on what's in front of him at a given moment, and really all shaped by the prism of what benefits Donald Trump. So in the case of Ukraine, it's been a stunning reversal of the American position. Comes close to leaving Ukraine open to Russia and a peace discussion that would undoubtedly produce a conclusion very favorable to Russia. Now, it's not certain that that's going to happen because we still don't know what European leaders will do. We don't know how Zelensky will react, although tensions between Trump and Zelensky at this point are pretty high. And we don't know whether members of Congress who recognize this as essentially switching sides in the war, whether they will simply accept that, as they've accepted many other things in Trump's first month, or whether they will speak out. The early indications are that this has provoked a lot of discontent, particularly among Republicans. We'll see what happens, but it underlines, I think, why it's difficult to predict. As of now, I would say, though, that it's pretty difficult situation for Ukraine and for NATO as a whole.
Can you imagine the peace agreement over the Ukraine head, over the Europe head, that the US can just give Ukraine in full control of Ukraine to Moscow, because many Europeans, also Poles, Ukrainians, of course, afraid of that?
Well, I don't think it would go that far, but it could come close. I mean, for example, one thing that Trump has said, astounding everybody, is that Zelensky is very unpopular. He's at 4% in the polls. He's a dictator, that there needs to be an election in Ukraine, notwithstanding that the Russians control 20% of the territory at this point. This is the sort of thing that is just unhinged from reality. And it's very close to the Kremlin's own propaganda, as it is with Trump on a number of other things as well. So it's not so much he would surrender the whole country, but he could make it effectively impossible for Ukraine to have the kind of security guarantees that Zelensky has been asking for. I'm just very worried about how this whole process of negotiation is going to play out, and it's in the course of the negotiation that if the United States sides with Russia on key questions, very hard to see how the Ukrainians resist.
And can you imagine that Donald Trump could attend on the 9th of May parade in Moscow on the Red Square? Because, you know, many Europeans see it's possible, and Donald Trump looking for another pictures with Putin showing this US-Russian allies. Do you see it's possible?
Well, I think it is possible. Look, in simply the fact of the 90-minute telephone call on February the 11th pulled Putin out of isolation globally because of the invasion of Ukraine in 2022. And then for Trump later to say, I've invited him to Washington and I'd like to go to Moscow, really just underlines that point. Putin tried to convince Trump to go to what we would call the Russian victory in Europe celebration during Trump's first term. And Trump was very interested in going. It worked out that he didn't, fortunately. But yes, unfortunately, I could see that as a prospect. Trump likes military parades. You know, Macron invited him to Bastille Day in 2017, and Trump thought it was about the best thing he'd ever seen. So that's even a French performance on Bastille Day pales when the Russians put one on in Red Square.
Many Trump's advisors say that the US troops in the eastern flank of NATO is not maybe necessary. We need to think about only our security. So what is true about it? What is the pros and cons if you talk about the military presence from the US perspective in Poland, Baltic states, Romania? It's possible that Donald Trump can decide maybe to reduce the soldiers, maybe after the peace agreement, or in Poland especially, we care about it because we see that this is like fundamental stuff if you talk about our security, the US military presence in Poland.
I think, unfortunately, some kind of troop withdrawals would be possible. The Secretary of Defense Hegseth announced a day or two ago that he was ordering the Pentagon to consider budget cuts that would amount to something like $50 billion over the next 4 or 5 years, 8% cuts a year for that period. That's exactly the wrong direction for U.S. defense spending to go in. It should be increasing substantially. Trump was actually right when he said to European nations, you should be spending at 5% of GDP. So should the United States. But that's not what the Defense Department appears to be projecting. And I think this is why Ukraine, while it may be the focus of attention now, it's the implication for broader questions of Western security and the dangers that we face that would be entirely to the benefit of the Russians in Europe and the Chinese on a global basis. It's the way that Putin, former KGB agent that he is able to manipulate Trump is really something quite remarkable. And it would not be at all surprising if the future of NATO is put in jeopardy because of what's going on in Ukraine. I've been saying for some time, based on my own experience, I think it's a real danger that Trump could withdraw the United States from NATO. But you can have the same practical effect by withdrawing American forces from Europe, by calling into question whether we would honor the Article 5 commitment to treat an attack on one as an attack on all. There are any number of ways you can weaken the alliance that don't require formal withdrawal, although I still think Trump could do that because that's the biggest headline he could get.
Some experts say that what we observe now is some kind of master plan from the Trump because he wants to keep Russia close and keep away from China. Of course, preparing some kind of maybe direct confrontation between the US and China, and he trying to keep Russia away from the Beijing. Do you think this is the reason why Donald Trump trying to reset, trying to establish the new relationship with Russia?
No, I don't think that's it at all. I guess I'd make 2 points. Number one, there are a lot of people who try and explain Trump, who try and justify all his various dealings and say it's part of a comprehensive master plan. No, it's not. They say Trump plays three-dimensional chess. No, he doesn't. He plays regular chess, one move at a time. He deals with what's in front of him, and that's it. It's certainly a long-term American strategic objective, and should be for Europe too, to split Russia away from China to try and defeat the axis that the two of them are forming. But the fact is, movement toward this axis has been underway for quite some time. It has accelerated in the past year or two. It's mostly to the benefit of China, which is very much the senior partner, unlike the Sino-Soviet alliance of the Cold War, where the Soviet Union was the senior partner. And this axis has real implications for Europe, too, because the Chinese threat is not just along its Indo-Pacific perimeter. Right now, it's in Central Europe. And as if that's not bad enough, some of the outriders of the Axis, Belarus, Iran, North Korea, Cuba, Venezuela, are all part of it too. I mean, it's been, I don't know, 1,000 years since people from Asia fought in Central Europe, but North Korean troops are there right now. And that is a reality I think we all have to acknowledge. I'd love to find a way to split Russia away from China. I raised it in several visits to Moscow when I served in the administration. And the line from the Russians was quite clear. We understand this. We've got it under control. We're not worried. We're not going to be dominated by China. So I don't think surrendering Ukraine to Russia will convince them to separate with China. If anything, I think it will bolster their belief that they can get what they want in the territory of the former Soviet Union and maybe beyond.
You spent some time with Donald Trump in White House when you was the national security advisor. What is the personal relationship Donald Trump with Vladimir Putin? Trump like him, looking to Russia with love. What is his the personal statement, or maybe relationship with Russia? Because as we know, geopolitics also is about the personal relations.
Right. Well, Trump thinks that if he has good relations with a foreign head of state, then the U.S. has good relations with that country. And as you say, you can never discount personal relations. But for the hard men like Vladimir Putin or Xi Jinping, they don't care about personal relations. They care about state interest. And Putin knows what he wants in Ukraine and with respect to European security generally. And he thinks he can manipulate Trump. Trump doesn't see this. He doesn't understand it. He has no situational awareness, as they say. And that's why I think it's very dangerous for Ukraine that Trump is open to this manipulation, some of which you can see, as we've just talked about, in Trump saying things that were invented in Moscow. Very few people who know the situation in Ukraine believe they're anything close to reality, except, unfortunately, Donald Trump.
And do you think that we can say about something like the collective Trump, like his advisors, pushing him to, I don't know, calling Zelensky as a dictator, or maybe the personal statement from the Donald Trump is the official policy and everyone around him needs to realize this, do this policy, or it's maybe working completely different?
Well, I think inside the administration, there are differences of opinion. And, the hope has to be that people who value NATO as an important aspect of American security, obviously, as well as European security, and who see allowing Putin's unprovoked aggression against Ukraine to prevail is bad news elsewhere in Europe and elsewhere around the world. If they can prevail against those who say, we don't have any interest in Europe, we don't have any interest in the Middle East, the only thing we worry about is China, then there's a chance to save the direction of policy. But the number of people who say they understand exactly what Trump is doing is very large, and almost none of them do, because on any given day, Trump doesn't know what he's going to do from morning to afternoon. So in my book, I described all of Trump's decisions in his first term as like an archipelago of dots sort of out there. You can try and draw lines between the dots. Good luck with that. Trump can't even draw lines between the dots.
Why Poland is described as the best student in the NATO class, according to the Trump administration, that the current White House love us because we buy a lot of military stuff from the United States, or maybe there is a different reason. We are strong and the best European allies today for Trump, or not?
Well, I think Poland was in very good shape in Trump's first term with President Duda. He was asking for greater deployments of American forces, and that turned out. He wanted to create Fort Trump, which Trump liked as an idea originally, although it was never implemented. I'm not so sure what the relationship is today. I think it remains strong because of the historical circumstances. But the fact that Trump has reversed U.S. policy to the extent he has on Ukraine doesn't bode well, unfortunately, for any American alliance, whether it's NATO or bilateral. The entirely transactional way that Trump approaches things basically means you have to prove you're worthwhile to him every single day.
It's very hard to say, but do you think that it's possible that the Trump administration, in some kind of deal with Russia, can sacrifice Baltic states, but very strong defense in Poland or Romania? Or for United States, all of the NATO members need the same kind of security? Or maybe Trump can decide, like, Baltic state, okay, maybe it's better to back control to the Russia in some kind of deal, but Poland is too much important for US to sacrifice.
Well, I think the security for everybody lies in sticking together, but I worry that because Trump is susceptible to Putin's manipulation, that if Putin said, let's say in Estonia, there's a significant Russian ethnic minority, and if Putin said they're treating the Estonian government's treating these Russians so badly, it's just terrible. They're taking their land away from them. They won't let them vote. They put them in prison. Now, none of these things are true, but that doesn't make any difference if that's what Putin is telling Trump. And Putin would say, I don't really want to do this, but I just got to defend these poor Russians who are being oppressed by the terrible Estonian government. Trump might say, yeah, fine, I understand that. I mean, that is the kind of manipulation that we need to worry about. And I think it would behoove everybody who wants to see the United States stay in NATO and provide the security we have, because it enhances our own security, to find ways to make that case with Trump, because Putin obviously understands the concept of divide and rule. And I think he will try to find gaps within NATO to split some countries away from others, France and Germany, as examples. But if he can weaken NATO in multiple ways, that simply enhances Putin's ability to say to Trump, you're doing all these favors for the Europeans. They don't do a thing for you in response. That's not true either, but that's what Putin would tell him, and that's what Trump might believe.
Do you have some advice for Europe states how to react on this very radical and very speed shift in the foreign US policy under the second term of Donald Trump in the White House? Do you see some kind of tips what we can use? Maybe quick respond about the possible military presence in Ukraine, or maybe something completely different?
Well, I think the first thing is not to panic, and I know that's hard given the changes that Trump has made. But I do think within the United States, particularly within the Republican Party, after a month in office, we're now seeing a number of senators and House members come out and quite clearly oppose this shift in U.S. policy on Ukraine. I think that's a very positive development. The other thing I would urge is to remember that NATO is the defense capability of the West as a whole. And it's not just an organization like the European Union. It is the embodiment of national decisions to engage in a collective defense project. So I think it was a mistake for President Macron of France earlier this week to call meetings in Paris to look only for a European response, because I think if the European Union becomes, and this is something France has pushed for a long time, a kind of substitute for NATO, that would only enhance Trump's argument that the Europeans are going to do this for themselves. They don't need NATO. Fine, we don't need NATO either. It would hasten the demise of NATO if Europe's response isn't careful.
And if we talk about NATO, is it possible that this kind of organization can exist without very active and military presence US in Europe? Or if we talk about the whole north part of the globe, if Trump administration decide about maybe some kind of withdrawal from the NATO organization, that this kind of allies can exist in future, or it's without US is impossible?
Look, NATO without the United States would be a hollow shell, and that's the sad reality. I think U.S. withdrawal from NATO would be catastrophic for everybody concerned. But I do think that's possible with Trump. So it's going to be a very difficult 4 years. But that's why I say the reaction, I think, has to be from countries like Poland in particular. Look, our mutual defense relationship benefits you, Mr. Trump, as much as it benefits Poland, and explain why. That it's shown that he's protecting American interest in Europe. This is not some, academic project about saving democracy. This is about real security, and Trump would look like a stronger leader if he kept the alliance in force.
You observed very closely the preparation of the Trump-Kim summit in Singapore. Do you think that now we observe something similar if we talk about the preparation of the Trump-Putin summit, that Trump looking for some kind of like pictures, showing him with the handshake with Putin, but without result, without like permanent agreement and so on? It's only about the show, or maybe it's something more behind this kind of thinking?
Well, certainly in the meetings that Trump had with Kim Jong-un during his term, nothing substantive emerged from them, which was a very good thing. But the publicity that was attendant on them, especially the first meeting in Singapore, the first time an American president had ever met a North Korean leader, Trump enjoyed very much, even though the big winner was Kim Jong-un, because but none of his neither his father nor his grandfather could ever expect to have such a meeting. I think especially if the first meeting between Trump and Putin in Trump's second term takes place in Saudi Arabia, the level of attention would be extraordinary. And Trump would be at the center of attention, which is where he wants to be.
I want to end our interview with a question about the current opinion about the Donald Trump. Do you see that he radicalized, in the last years? Many experts, many commentators say he was like dictator, stepping the constitution, broke the fundamental law. Other people say he's like a master plan, trying to reshape the US in completely different form. What is your opinion that Donald Trump will shock us more very emotional decisions, or maybe, he trying to find some completely different strategy, which we don't see now?
He's not following a comprehensive strategy because he doesn't have a comprehensive strategy. It really is, in the main at this point, I think, a kind of retribution against his enemies, people in the first term he thinks persecuted him in the Defense Department and the Justice Department and other parts of the government. And it's trying to reverse things that Biden did to show that he can do it. And some of it's just silly, like trying to change the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. Maybe Poland will become Virginia in a later Trump effort. It is all about Trump trying to magnify his own importance. And I don't think our institutions are fundamentally threatened. I think they're much stronger than Trump. I think the Constitution has survived a lot greater threats than Donald Trump, and it will survive this one. Unfortunately, he has 47 months left now, and he could do a lot of damage. But I don't think it's an existential threat to democracy. And I think that for countries around the world that share common interests and values with the United States, it's important to try and keep it in perspective and to remember, notwithstanding that Trump got elected, that his opinions are so idiosyncratic, so aberrational, that while they will flourish while he's in office, they will disappear pretty rapidly after he leaves.
Thank you very much for this interview. Państwa i moim gościem był John Bolton, były doradca do spraw bezpieczeństwa narodowego w pierwszej kadencji Donalda Trumpa w Białym Domu. Thank you very much for this time.
Thanks for having me.